Education technology, or EdTech, became the mainstay of education during the 82-week school closure across the country. The increasing demand saw great vibrancy in the EdTech ecosystem, with a number of EdTech solutions catering to address the learning gaps. But a majority of these solutions were designed to meet the needs of middle and high-income families, leaving limited options for families from low-income groups. The challenge was the lack of comprehensive and dependable data regarding the needs, opportunities, and obstacles of children from low-income segments of the population. This further hindered policymakers and social innovators from effectively addressing their concerns and developing solutions tailored to their specific circumstances. To bridge this information gap, Central Square Foundation recently carried out the first of its kind household survey aimed to give a stronger voice to the end users from low-income families. The Bharat Survey for EdTech, or BaSE in short, strives to answer crucial questions around EdTech usage, perception, and adoption. Hello, and a very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Edge Talks, where we interact with experts from the education sector to gain sharp and practical insights on a range of issues affecting learning around education. Our guest today is someone who has been working in the space of social impact for more than a decade. She has led the assessment of large-scale interventions on education undertaken by foundations, philanthropies, CSOs, and many other development sector partners, including the Adarsh Vidyalaya Yojana and early childhood education programs. Vasudha Chakravarthy is the founder director at Development Solutions, a research and consulting organization based out of Delhi that works with various stakeholders in the government and development sector in areas of education, healthcare, and other allied sectors. Vasudha has managed studies in Cambodia and Sri Lanka on youth skills and livelihoods. She holds a master's in public health and was one of the 10 global fellows associated with Maternal Health Young Championship Program of the Harvard School of Public Health. Development Solutions was the data collection and analysis partner for the Bharat Survey for EdTech. We caught up with her to understand how the survey helps in bridging the current knowledge gap. Hello, Vasudha, and a very warm welcome to CSF. It is a pleasure to have you with us for this episode of Edge Talks. Let me start by asking you about the entire process of the Bharat Survey for EdTech.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gauri, and the CSF team for having me here. Doing the entire BaSE survey has been quite an interesting experience for us at Development Solutions. India has quite a vibrant EdTech ecosystem. A lot of studies and research that was done gave us a lot of insight on what the digital divide actually sort of looked like. Even studies that we did at Development Solutions, you would go to households and that would have only one phone, for instance, and it's not necessary that the child has access to that phone, or some families who actually had to buy phones to give their children access to education. And to that extent, the BaSE survey was so critical to understand that particular socio-demographic group, to understand their access to technology, to the internet, to understand their perceptions on EdTech and how they're actually using it. So given the criticality of this survey, the methodology was one that had to be robust, a sample that was representative. And so, we started out by selecting 6 states. These were UP, MP, Gujarat, Orissa, Mizoram, and Telangana. The states were selected based on population size and internet penetration, also to ensure representation of different regions in the country, as well as linguistic representation. Within each of these states, a multi-stage sampling process was followed. Each of the states was divided into 4 clusters using machine learning. Within each clusters, districts were then selected using a technique called population proportion to size. Within districts, randomly blocks, and then settlements were selected. And within settlements, every 6th house was surveyed. The household that was surveyed were ones where students were studying either in government schools or in affordable private schools. So that's how the BaSE was sort of rolled out.
Wonderful. The Bharat Survey of EdTech, or BaSE, was aimed at removing the information asymmetry around access, usage and perception within low-income households around EdTech. Given that it was the first of its kind survey, can you walk us through the methodology followed to ensure robustness and comprehensiveness in the survey methodology?
Right. As you said, it was one of a kind and the first to sort of understand the status of EdTech, access to technology, perceptions around EdTech, and use and adoption of EdTech among the lower socioeconomic group. While India has a vibrant EdTech ecosystem, there are few solutions that have actually been able to scale to the lower socioeconomic group. For instance, in households, there would be one phone that everybody would have access to, and it's not necessary that children would have access to that phone for education. So, as I said, understanding this demographic is critical to understanding EdTech going forward. And to that extent, given the nature of the survey, our effort was to ensure a robust methodology and a sample selection that's representative. And so we began with selecting states. 6 states were selected for the study. These were UP and MP, Gujarat, Orissa, Mizoram and Telangana. The states were selected based on their population size and internet penetration and to ensure geographic and linguistic representation. Each of these states were then divided into 4 clusters based on machine learning. And within the clusters, districts were selected using a technique called population proportion to size. Within districts, blocks were randomly selected and then settlements. Within each of these settlements, every 6th household was surveyed. And the households that were selected were those where children were either in government schools or in affordable private schools.
Vasudha, with data collection at this scale, there come multiple challenges. Right. And it is always critical and hard to ensure that the sanctity and robustness of data gathered from such surveys is ensured. What were some of the ways your team ensured that there was a high degree of fidelity in the data collection?
Right. So data quality is at the heart of what we do at Development Solutions. And we ensure data quality at multiple stages, and I'll talk you through these specific to the BaSE. So starting with the tool development, the tool itself went through multiple iterations. The teams at Development Solutions, as well as CSF and experts, went through multiple rounds of discussion to determine which question, how should it be worded, where should it be placed, and all of that. Then, the questions were pre-tested under multiple contexts, and feedback of both the enumerators as well as the respondents were incorporated and the tool was revised. There are also checks that we put in when we do the scripting and coding. So, for instance, there are validity checks. So, if you're doing a survey with a child and you want to say that the child is only going to be under 18 years of age, then you can limit it when you're coding the tool, saying an enumerator cannot put an age more than 18. Similarly, when we're doing the scripting coding, there are skip logic checks. So all of these things were built in at the tool development stage itself. Then a detailed survey manual is developed that sort of guides the enumerators even beyond the training in terms of how the questions are to be articulated, if they have any challenges when they're on the field. Third, coming to training. So there was a 3-day training that was conducted, 2 days of classroom training, which sort of took the teams through the survey methodology, the objectives, how this is actually going to be executed in the field, detailed orientation on ethical protocols, on how they should be taking consent, how they should be explaining, say, respondents' right to refusal, that they can stop the survey at any time. Again, detailed orientation of the tool running through each of the questions, mock sessions for them to articulate the questions and for our team to see whether they're articulating it correctly with the right intent. And finally, the last day was also something we call field practice, where they actually go to the field conditions and simulate in a location that's not selected for the survey. And the teams come back, and then there's a detailed debrief session that's done to understand what are the possible challenges they can face on the field, and if they come across those challenges, how are they to be addressed. The teams for the survey are finally selected post a training evaluation. Then coming to data collection, there are checks during the data collection process as well. We have debrief sessions every day in the morning and evening with the team to understand challenges they face, to problem solve, ensure communication is clear. Our team also runs back-end checks on the data that comes in. So to check average timing of the surveys, completeness of the surveys, validity of certain questions. based on which feedback is provided to the teams. In extreme situations, if they feel that some of the surveys don't fit, or there are outliers and the team is not able to provide adequate insight on why it's an outlier, we may choose to drop that survey and ask the team to repeat it. And finally, of course, there are field supervisors and data monitors on the field whose responsibility is to ensure everything is moving correctly and data quality is robust.
BaSE has thrown out some really interesting insights around adoption and sentiment amongst users around EdTech. What are some of the insights that were noteworthy for you?
Right. So that's actually a very interesting, pertinent question. So there are several insights that are already out in the public domain. Some that stand out include, so for instance, the fact that 85% households now own a phone, common platforms such as YouTube, Google, WhatsApp being used for education. But as we sort of reflected as a team post the report, some of the key things that really stand out for us. One, in terms of perception that EdTech is a supplement to school education. So big takeaway for me there is that EdTech and school education go hand in hand. Second, the fact that EdTech is being used for subjects that perhaps students find difficult to understand or learn, or where they don't have enough support within schools and other systems. So for instance, in primary grades for English and math, and in higher grades for science. Third, that EdTech allows self-paced learning, and that's something that students find comfortable. So for me, these aspects sort of bring out questions that are we able to integrate EdTech along with school systems in a way that it supplements classroom learning, and students are able to learn certain subjects in a pace that's comfortable to them. So for me, that's a question from the insights that we have. Another important aspect that I would think of is cost. So among families that are not using EdTech, one of the big factors that has come up is cost. We also know that families are spending roughly 400 to 500 rupees a month on private tuitions. So if EdTech is actually that cheap, is made that cheap in the future, that at 400 or 500 rupees a month, they're able to afford an EdTech solution, then is that a potential for more students to be using EdTech? And finally, of course, there are all data, there's always state level variations, but some of these variations are actually quite interesting to look at, and something that could be mined more from the data. So for instance, in Orissa, a high proportion actually feel the need for supplemental education, whereas in Andhra, it's actually a very small proportion. So going forward, it might actually be interesting to understand and further explore some of these trends. So for us, I think those are some of the key highlights that stand out.
At CSF, we take great pride in making resources that are accessible to all. The data sets from this survey will be published while ensuring the anonymity of the participants. For people using these data sets, particularly researchers, would you have any recommendations on how best to use the data that you have so diligently collected?
Right. So, so when we analyze the data and write the report, that's often almost the start. I mean, there's a lot more that any data set always offers for us to look at. So given that it's specific to the lower socioeconomic group, I think the data offers a wealth in terms of people looking at it, both those working in EdTech solutions as well as researchers, to come up with context-specific solutions and more directed interventions. That's definitely something that can be looked at. People working in the policy research space, some of the insights are actually quite telling. The fact that, say, EdTech and school education go hand in hand. And I'm sure there are more insights as we look at the data. So does the data actually offer us more thoughts to guide our sort of policy and program direction itself? So these are a couple of things that come to our mind right now. And I'm sure as people keep looking at it, there's more that they're going to be able to find.
Vasudha, my last question to you. Given you've been so closely associated with this survey, what would your recommendations be for what the next round should look like?
Right. It's already exciting to know that we are going to be doing another round, reflecting on some of our learnings from this round, and thinking ahead. One, I think just that we're going to be doing it again gives us a great opportunity to track some of these matrices over time in terms of what access, of what perceptions and use of EdTech is looking like, which will provide us insight in terms of the EdTech ecosystem and landscape. So for instance, is the kind of EdTech products or the kind of EdTech platforms that students are using, is this evolving over time? Are there more parents who are willing to actually invest in getting smartphones for their children to access EdTech? So that's one in terms of keeping this going. Two, in the surveys going forward, maybe take the opportunity to explore a little bit more on, say, the gender disparities or disparities between income groups, rural and urban settlements, even within urban settlements between lower and not so lower socioeconomic groups. And finally, perhaps also use the opportunity to look at maybe add a few intent questions to some of the aspects. So we've already captured perceptions. Maybe we could add a few more questions that might throw light on what is the intent behind those perceptions or intent behind use of certain EdTech platforms or modules. So yeah, I think that's how I see it sort of going forward. And I see this to be a great source of data that sort of informs the EdTech ecosystem and solutions going forward.
Thank you, Vasudha, for sharing such wonderful and deep insights. It has been a pleasure to have you with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gauri, and to the CSF team. It was a lovely experience for us working on the BaSE survey. A lot of fun, a lot of interaction with your teams, and of course, a lot of learning and reflection for us. And yeah, hope to be associated with you doing this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed the episode of Edge Talks. Do join us next time for yet another exciting episode as we meet with other experts from the education sector. Tell us what you feel in the comment section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.